There is an intelligence with infinite potential to touch everything. Empowering connectivity, transforming industry, changing society. What is the engine driving this intelligence? Human minds. Endlessly curious, relentlessly thinking ahead. This is our platform. Powering technology forward with future-focused investment and global collaboration. Harnessing our infinite capacity to dream and audacity to make it happen.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Banco Sabadell stage here at 4 years from now, Barcelona 2026, where our Infinite AI program continues. For those of you who were here for the opening part of this morning, we had Azim Azhar chatting on the stage about the exponential nature that technology in general takes us, but that's really been exemplified by what we've been seeing with AI over the last 3.5, 4 or so years, and what's happening next with regards to agents. And that frames our discussions this morning for the next part, which I've subtitled here, Apps Are Dead, Long Live the Agent. So for the last 10 or 15 or so years, SaaS, software as a service, has been really the dominant business model. Software delivered by the cloud, continuous delivery. It's subscriptions, feature upgrades. You know what SaaS is, of course. But it's transformed how businesses, how startups go to market, and transformed how businesses buy those services. However, I think we can all recognize what's happening right now is that there is a shift taking place in the market from software as a tool to agent as an outcome. These autonomous, context-aware AI agents that reason, act, and collaborate are effectively becoming the new application layer. So, are SaaS apps dead? That's the question that we're going to be addressing variously over the next session here. We should say that this session is brought to us in association with our sponsors. Thank you very much to the theme headline sponsor, EY, and also to the theme supporting sponsor, SaaS. And we've got a very short video to play from the team at EY. Take it away.
In a world of seismic change, will your business shape the future or be shaped by it? How will we capture the imagination of tomorrow's consumers? Harness technology and AI to shape the way we live our lives, and unlock economic and social prosperity through environmental responsibility. With EY's full spectrum of services, we're all in to reimagine the enterprise and shape the future with confidence.
Super, thank you very much to SaaS and to EY for making this session possible. Joining us first for an opening presentation, inviting us to rethink how agents impact marketing, impact business, and impact humanity. Please put your hands together for Chief AI Officer with WPP, Daniel Hume.
Okay, we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to give you, hopefully, a different way of thinking about AI and agents today that's more useful than what we see on LinkedIn. I've been involved in AI for about 25 years, 27 years. My undergraduate 27 years ago was within AI at UCL. There was 2 people on my course. Things have changed a lot since then. My master's, my PhD postdocs are all in AI from UCL. I started a company about 18 years ago that's been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world. I sold that to WPP, the biggest marketing company in the world, 5 years ago, where I now run AI across about 120,000 people, and I get to do exciting things. I invest in companies now, and I also started a company recently to solve machine consciousness. I'll talk about it tomorrow on the founder stage. All right, so that's me, it's boring. Let's talk about AI. I guess for the past 10 years, we've been told to build data lakes, and put Tableau on top, and the hope is that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it will lead to better decisions. If I'm honest with you, giving human beings better insights doesn't typically lead to better decisions. Companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems. And it turns out that human beings are rubbish at making decisions. There are plenty of books out there that will convince you of that. I don't have time today to convince you that humans are not capable of making certain decisions. Always start with a decision and work backwards. Anyway, if I build a system that I give data to it, it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would controversially argue that by definition, automation is stupid. I know that everybody that touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients, we get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition of AI, I think, is by far the weakest definition of AI, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. So for the past 3 years, we've managed to get machines to correspond in natural language, recognize objects and images, and when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. And again, there are plenty of books out there that will convince you that humans are not a good pinnacle of intelligence. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from a definition of intelligence from the 1980s. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being controversial, if I held what we do in industry to this definition, one might argue that nobody's doing AI. Of course, that's a ridiculous statement because we're all doing AI, but the true pinnacle of AI are systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. I use the word safely carefully because agents can adapt themselves in production. A little bit of a history lesson. This is AI in the 60s and 70s. It's Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and that all men are mortal, I can infer that Socrates is mortal. I can create new knowledge from that information. AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world to try to infer new knowledge and make better decisions. It didn't really work. It didn't really scale. This is having a renaissance. We call this agentic computing, sort of. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI started to mature based on how our brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 22 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. Bumblebees can do amazing things just like human beings. They can navigate 3D worlds, and they recognize objects. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle windows very well, but ultimately, they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million neurons in a machine? 20 years ago, we couldn't, but we can now model billions of neurons. We currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are a crude representation of your brain. We know the rhetoric. They require lots of energy to learn. They require lots of data. They learn very slowly. That is all true. Your brain does not need a nuclear power station to run. Your brain operates in the power of a light bulb. But there are many innovations that are coming out of academia that will completely challenge how these models work. That said, they are getting smarter. So 10 years ago, large language models were a little bit like toddlers. They regurgitated some words. Most of it didn't make sense. ChatGPT was launched 3 years ago. Arguably, ChatGPT is like an intoxicated graduate. 50% of what ChatGPT comes out with is confidently incorrect. We are now seeing it moving to like a master's level where it can do rudimentary reasoning. This year, next year, we might have a PhD level, so something that can do rudimentary science. I think in the next few years, we're going to see a postdoc level, so something that can actually apply a complex scientific method to solving very complex problems. And by the end of this decade, in 4 years' time, we're going to have a professor in our pocket, something that can not only solve very complicated problems, but actually can ask questions that humanity has never asked. Now, Azim previously talked about this idea that AI or agents are able to spend longer doing tasks. You've also got to think about the depth of capability. And this is why it's important to think about the depth, the capability of agents, because at some point we're going to end up with a world where you have an infinite professors in your pocket. Beyond 4 years, nobody knows what they're talking about. Anyway, so I don't look at AI through definitions or technologies. I look at AI through applications. All of the frictions that we experience across our organizations, I think, can be mapped to one or more of these 6 applications. This is the lens that I think about applying AI. So the first application actually is task automation. You can use very simple algorithms, if-then-else statements, macros, robotic process automation to replace lots of mundane, repetitive tasks. You can drive a huge amount of value using simple algorithms. You don't need to use generative AI and machine learning. The second category is content generation. Now, everybody has the ability to create any generic content. Text, imagery, sound, video. This is cute, but it's not going to differentiate your business. The battleground is how do you create brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. In WPP, we create lots of content. We create a quarter of the world's ads. I want to geek out a second. There are broadly 4 ways of making a brain smart. The first way is asking it better questions. By better prompting, you get better results, but it's only going to be bounded by the knowledge of that brain. The second way of making a brain smart is just like an intoxicated graduate. You give it, in this case, your brand guidelines, your written copy, some tone of voice. You ask it to create an ad, and just like an intoxicated graduate, it will give you an ad 50% that's good. The third way of making a brain smart is turning that graduate into an expert. Now, we know how long it takes humans to become experts. It takes years of trial and error, training, blood, sweat, tears, mentorship. In the AI world, there are only a handful of models that you can actually tune and train. And that process currently takes months, and it requires lots of human in the loop. The fourth way of making a brain smart is an agentic approach. So you create an agent that's an expert at your written copy, your brand guidelines, your imagery, your tone of voice, your company values. Just like in the real world, you get multiple experts that are collaborating and communicating to get to an answer greater than the sum of the parts. The power of agents is not agency. The power of agents is a concept called multi-agent reasoning. It's been around for many, many decades. It's getting these technologies to collaborate and communicate to get to solutions greater than they can as an individual. As he mentioned this already, in a world where we can create content, the next question is, how do I understand whether that content is good? For the first time ever, we can build brains or agents that recreate how people think and feel about things. Historically, if I show you an ad, I didn't know what goes on in your mind and body unless I ask you, and people are not very good at reporting on what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, we can build brains that recreate those signals. We can use those signals to create better content, but also predict activation. I don't have time for that. This is what people called AI 4 years ago, before generative AI. It's machine learning. You already know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning isn't making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks and the likes and the sales. But if you apply machine learning and say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. It's a terrible example. I need a better example. But the point is, machine learning can surface insights from data in ways that generative AI can't, in ways that human beings can't, and we can use those insights to ultimately make better decisions. Decision-making is the fifth category. I want to really help you understand how complicated decision-making is. Let me ask you a question. Imagine you've got 5 staff members, 5 salespeople you need to allocate to 5 jobs, 5 clients. There are 5 factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 possible solutions, 120 possible solutions. If we make the problem a little bit more complicated, I've now got 15 staff members. How many solutions are there? Don't say 15 factorial, that's cheating. There's over 1 trillion possible solutions. So to expect a human to solve this problem, we are wasting our time. One rule to take away today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Industry have problems of this size, so here are 500 staff members. Can you tell me how many solutions are? No, you can't. It's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits, and just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things you have to consider, whether you are allocating staff to work, routing vehicles, spending marketing money across channels, there are more solutions than there are atoms in the universe. This is a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. Agents, large language models, cannot solve these problems in the same way that human beings cannot really solve these problems. AIs or agents are not a panacea that's going to solve all of our problems. It's really important to understand there are other algorithms out there that they can use to drive real value. Now, maybe when we get to a professor in our pocket, these AIs will be able to build algorithms to solve these problems, but they won't probably compete with the decades of research that's gone into actually optimizing these types of problems. The final category is human augmentation. So what's very exciting is that most people are now using their AI, their personal AI as therapists. So you're telling it your hopes, your dreams, your desires, your preferences. At some point, you will give agency to those AIs. You will give it the ability to make purchasing decisions. So we, as a marketing community, not only need to figure out how do we get the attention of human beings, we now need to figure out how do we market to the billions of agents that are going to be creating that are representing you. And that's very exciting because agents are going to be much more rational at making decisions than human beings, which means that purpose, values, evidencing your values to the customer is going to become a more important thing. So when I think about deploying AI in production, I usually ask myself 4 questions. The first question is the intent appropriate? Is this the right thing to do? The difference between human beings and AIs is AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent, and it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. Actually, I would argue there's no such thing as AI ethics, at least what people think is AI ethics. Bias is a software problem, it's not an ethical problem. The second question you need to ask yourself is, are my algorithms explainable? The difference really between AI and software is AI tends to be opaque in terms of how it makes decisions. If you can make them explainable, then most of these words disappear. They become transparent and auditable. Explainability is your key problem to solve. The third question is an interesting one. It's not what happens if my AI goes wrong, it's what happens if my AI goes very right. For the first time ever, these technologies can overachieve the goal that we give it, and it can actually cause harm elsewhere in the supply chain and to humanity. And the final question you need to ask yourself is a boring one. It's, have I tested my AI? I know it sounds silly, but what's happening right now is companies are going to deploy an army of intoxicated graduates across their organization, and forgive the technical term, but it's going to be a shit show. These technologies are not going to be capable of doing the job that you want it to do. It will fail. There's going to be much more emphasis over the next few years on AI governance, safety, security, making sure that AI software is deployed in the right way. Okay, when I work with organizations, there are 4 red flags that I try to find that will tell me whether an AI project is going to be successful. The first red flag is a lot of organizations think they can build and scale software inside their organization. If you've never built and scaled software, you're going to find it very hard to build and scale AI. The second red flag is usually some CXO trying to hire an AI team. And the reality is that most people have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 3 years. But if you want to build differentiated supply chains, if you want to build a differentiated organization, you need to be able to hire differentiated talent. And those people have been building AI solutions for the past 20 years, and they're very expensive. You need to be honest with yourself about your ability to attract and retain deep AI talent. The third category is waiting for your data to be in order. Your data will never be in order. 15 years later, our data is not ready. Always start with the problem and work backwards. And finally, I'm guilty of this all the time. Let's focus on the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit. The reality is most of those productivity gains, the things that people are currently focusing on, are going to be solved by a third-party vendor at a fraction of the cost. You as an organization need to think about, how do I build software that's going to differentiate my supply chain from my competitors? That's not quick and it's not easy. Finally, okay, so I think that I love Steve Jobs' definition of innovation. The more you can innovate, the more you can adapt, the more intelligent you are. And as an organization, your job is to figure out, how do you adapt to a rapidly changing world? And I think I love Steve Jobs' definition. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is generating ideas and getting to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. And that process is long and hard and painful. Founders, entrepreneurs, you embody that process. Your job is to close that gap as fast as possible, and AI can help with that. I think there are 3 things that differentiate an organization in the world of AI. The first is data. It's not technology. Technology is not a differentiator unless you're building foundational models. It's data that makes the AI smart. If you have data that contains more useful insights than your competitors, then you have an advantage. If you don't have data that differentiates you, you need to think about a differentiated business model, maybe open source or something like that. The second is you then need to be able to leverage and attract deep AI talent to utilize those insights to drive value. And again, you need to be honest with yourself about your ability to do that. And the advantage that startups have over big corporates is startups have the ability to have a strong purpose. It's purpose that often attracts deep AI talent. And finally, it's people like you. It's leadership. If you are seduced by the hype, if you're starting the technology, if you think agents are going to solve real problems, you are going to make the wrong decisions. It's really important that you come to events like this, you educate yourself to make sure that you place the right bets. We can't afford over the next 4 years to place the wrong bets. So on that note, I'm going to stop and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, thank you. Super stuff. So, some really challenging insights there from Daniel. And Daniel's going to be joining us on stage in probably about 60 seconds' time once we've done the furniture stuff. Just a quick thing to mark your cards for later on today, some of the sessions that might interest you. We have our health tech track keynote at 3 p.m. Miracle Cure or Placebo, AI's current impact on healthcare. That's with Lucas Sari and a few others. The Founders Academy, 3 o'clock until 6 p.m. AI Advantage, delving into AI tools for the founder's journey. And over on the founders stage, scaling high-velocity teams with Atif Rafiq. Also, things you might like to know, networking drinks. They're taking place this evening, 6 till 7 p.m. on the 4 Years From Now terrace. That's on this ground floor outside. I've lost my direct. Out there, okay, don't go out there. Go out there, that's where the networking drinks will be taking place. I think we are almost ready to continue with our next conversation on here, which is a panel session really delving a little bit more into the topics we were discussing there about how AI agents is prompting businesses at the moment. So please put your hands together and join me in welcoming to the stage our panelists for this session, who are Alvaro Martinez, CEO at Luthia. Welcome back, Daniel Hume, Chief AI Officer with WPP. Elisenda Balbalus, CEO at Kala AI. And finally, our moderator for this session is Ivan Landabasso, partner at JME Ventures.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming, guys. Good morning. Very excited to be here with a Tier 1 panel of builders. I think before we get going, I'm just going to give a little mental model to place each other on the right context, what agents are and so on. And then we'll go into get definitions on what it means for each of our panelists. But think about the software you use every day, Salesforce, Slack, Notion, what they are. They're interfaces that let you put data in, get data out, and follow a set of rules. If a lead scores above 80, route it to sales. If an invoice is late, send it a reminder. The rules live inside each app. That's basically the SaaS model, right? So now, here's what's changing. AI agents are absorbing these rules. Instead of you clicking through screens to follow a workflow, an agent reads the context, decides what to do, and does it. Microsoft's CEO says it's business logic moving into the agent layer. Naval Ravikant calls it AI is eating the UI. And if they're right, the question for the next 35 minutes is simple. What's left of software as a service? Where does the value go? And who wins? So with that, introducing you, Elisenda co-founded a video AI startup acquired for 50 million, Spain's first Apple acquisition. 4 years leading AI at Apple, and recently founded Kala AI, the trust infrastructure agents need to stop hallucinating. Thank you for coming. Daniel, you just spoke with him for the last 20 minutes, so you guys know what he does. Was in AI since before it was cool, founded Satalia, YPP acquired it for 100 million. And then we have Alvaro Martinez, CEO of Luthia AI. Launched Luthia on WhatsApp 2 years ago, 1 million users in 21 days, which is faster than Instagram, Spotify, or Dropbox. Today they have 65 million users across 40 countries. So with that said, let's get into it. So Elisenda, what's an agent from where you sit? How does that shape what Kala is building today?
Okay, I'm going to start simple. So to me, like an agent is basically an LLM that can do things autonomously or semi-autonomously. So for us, an agent is anything that leverages LLMs to do multi-turn iterations. So it can do something, receive that answer, and then do something else on top. And this is a bit for us. What we do at Kala basically is we think that the future is going to be like maybe 80% run by agents, run by these systems. And we want to ensure that they've got like trustworthy data for them to operate. So at the end, like if your agent can be as good or as bad as the data that you plug it into. So we built trustable infrastructure for them to be able to leverage accurate data and then produce accurate results.
Awesome. And Daniel, you've gotten through a few definitions on what AI is, but it would be great to get, for those who weren't here, a while ago. What are agents in the context of what you're building?
Yeah, I guess an agent is really a lazy way of interacting with software and data. Sometimes you shouldn't be lazy, but an agent can do that in a very lazy way. But also, I think for me, the power of agents isn't just their ability to interact with software and data, it's the ability to interact with each other and, again, create new knowledge that's never existed before. For me, multi-agent systems are the true power of agents, and Maltbook was a wake-up call for most people around that.
Awesome. Sir?
And I fully agree with both definitions. When we started Lucia, we had this hypothesis that AI was going to be changing everyone's life, and but that and that happened before with other technologies, like electricity, and we always use the same simile, thinking that we're still in the time in which AI is used as a light bulb to increase productivity of people working during the night. I think agent is that second phase in which we start imagining, hey, AI is going to be able to do things for me with or without my involvement, with or without my attention, and AI is going to start having real impact in how we work.
Okay, so we have some connective tissue here. Moving into, is the seat business model dead? Okay, so now we're talking about software as a service and how traditionally this has been monetized. So if business logic migrates to agents, let's take that assumption for a second, and agents do the work, what happens to the business model that charge humans to do it? So Alvaro, let's start with you. So like Lucia reached 65 million users without a sales team or pricing page. You've said premium subscriptions are dead end on your Substack, which is very good. You guys should read it.
Thank you.
So in the agent era, what's the business model if it's not seats and subscriptions? And I know you come from the consumer side, but it's still very interesting.
So when I said that, I obviously meant it in the context of consumer. And there were two strong reasons to say that. One is the value that agents or AI at that point was creating was not clear enough. So capturing that value, it was not easy. Like, hey, the obvious and the quick response to that one is going to be put in a subscription, and then I will figure out. The second, and I think is more important for consumer reason, was the fact that being able to pay that subscription is fully dependent on having disposable income. Having disposable income is something that 90% of the population don't have, and we need to figure out a way to bring that into more general public. Now, to the question of whether SaaS seats are not dead, I think eventually they will be, but it's very, very important that that first assumption that you put, we time it. Like, is this a 1-year thing, is a 5-year thing, or 10 years thing? We tend to extrapolate, and there has been a couple of cases in the last month in which we extrapolate how well the AI works right now to solve software into how well it will work to do everything else in the economy. I am a believer that we will manage to absorb that knowledge that you said in most of the industries. I don't think it's going to be as fast as we've been able to do it in software engineering, for the simple reason that software engineering is something that you can actually test, and you can train models on something that whether it works or not work. But we eventually will get there. But until we get there, there is a lot of value and information encoded in every single SaaS product. Like Benedict Evans, you always use this example, is every SaaS company is a wrapper over an Excel sheet. And I agree with that one, but there is a lot of knowledge embedded there. I used to be doing payroll in my previous company. Only in the US, there are 50,000 different jurisdictions. All that is very, very complicated to encode. So we still have time. Eventually, AI will get there, and we'll need to figure out new business models. It will be by Orcom or not. It will be maybe still by seats. I don't know. But we still have a lot of time. That's my key thing. It's like, it will happen, but it will take time.
Makes sense. Daniel, at YPP, you guys spend 300 million a year on AI, if I'm not mistaken, and you're deploying agents across thousands of people and clients. And how do you think about ROI? Like, are you pricing by the seed, by the campaign, by the result?
I think that it's important to understand that there are, oversimplifying, but there are 3 types of software. There's software that is a nice, shiny front end to some data, like finance systems and HR systems. They're not doing really anything smart that's transforming that data. They're just showing it and allowing people to interact with it in nice ways. I think that has a risk of being cannibalized by agents. In WPP, we've created an end-to-end marketing platform that has to do creativity. It has to predict whether your ad is going to lead to clicks, likes, and sales. It has to figure out how to optimize across channels. It has to understand how to surface or identify emerging segments. There is so much knowledge, data built into those brains, it would be impossible to get large language models or agents to do that off the shelf. And I think it's not right to bucket all software together. And then you wouldn't get agents to go and run a nuclear power station, right? That software has to be guaranteed to work 100%. So I think organizations need to understand, what their defensibility is. Is it a shiny UI, in which case you don't really have much defensibility? Is it deep knowledge that you can then embed into these tools? Or is it something that's mission critical that you just not use an agent for? But organizations, I think, need to take 3 approaches when empowering their employees or using agents. The first is, so we've heard the term probably shadow AI. It used to be called shadow IT 5 years ago, where people were using software tools without the organizations knowing. I think stopping people using AI is a very dumb thing to do. So in WPP, what we do is we allow people to build AIs at the edge. We've got something like 70,000 agents that people have built across the business. They're solving things from productivity problems to all sorts of problems. I've got no idea what they're doing, but I assume that it's driving value. But the point is that what you want to do is you want to empower your employees to innovate at the edge. But you also have to acknowledge that those employees can't necessarily or won't be able to build deep defensible technology. So inside WPP, we have Satalia, which is essentially our deep mind that I run, and they understand how to build what we call super agents. Again, understanding what data to use, how to leverage different types of algorithms. It needs to be tested, just like you would deploy software. And then what you want to do is you want to work with third-party vendors, suppliers, to then bringing software to solve productivity problems that you shouldn't be building agents for. There's no point in you going to build an agent that does expenses or onboarding or offboarding. You'll be able to buy that from a third party a fraction of the cost. So that for me is the right mix. Work with third parties that can solve the low-hanging fruit, have a deep domain expertise to differentiate your business, and enable people to use these technologies to innovate at the edge.
Also curious, from the enterprise perspective, and when you're actually buying software yourself for WPP.
Sorry?
When you're buying software, like when you're buying AIs or you have these AI providers coming to you, presumably you also have like procurement, right? And so procurement is used to buy a certain way. So do you think that with this new, let me price per outcome, there might be some resistance there for someone who expects predictability, no?
Yeah, I think pricing will change. People are going to price based on token usage, all that kind of stuff. And the reality is it will depend on the problem that you're trying to solve for. But the key thing here is to say, does it make sense for me to build this solution? Will it differentiate my business? If not, let's go to a third party. And the market will figure out how to price it most effectively for you.
Makes sense. Eli, you're building knowledge as a service, no? So how does this affect you? Does this shift, or whatever timeline it is, affect how you're pricing or how you're selling your solution?
I think it not only deeply affects us, but like we're building for that situation. Like we're building for that future where agents are running a lot of the stuff we do nowadays. And so basically to us, agents are our first customer in a way. So we are preparing to be selling to those agents. There's a future, I think both the things that you said made a lot of sense. So there is a future where everyone, if agents can skyrocket your productivity 20, 30x, then everyone is going to have multiple agents to do their own stuff. And then agents will also be writing some of this code that previously maybe was budgeted as for SaaS software services, etc. And I think this is coming. I think the more we happen to go through that route, the more agents will be deployed. And what we're solving is basically for them. We think there's a world where knowledge, having knowledge about your data, your procedures, everything that runs inside your company, and also being able to link that knowledge to the outside. So when I talk about WPP, which company am I actually talking to? So what we're building at Cala is this, and our agents are our first customers for this. So we see a world where agents need to be marketed as well, where you need to position yourself for them, and where agents will have the autonomy to decide whether they use your services or another company's services. So really affecting us and building for that.
Awesome. Okay, let's transition a little bit into some stuff that you guys already touched on, which are moats, incumbents, and who actually wins, which is impossible to know, but it's a good, interesting exercise to go through. So going back to our framework, if the app becomes just a tool the agent calls, then being a great app might not be enough anymore. So 2 questions in one. What makes an AI startup defensible? And can it survive the incumbents coming for it, right? From different perspectives. Alvaro, if you want to take this from the consumer side.
I am probably in the most complicated spot on that one, but to answer your question there, the way I think about this problem is AI doesn't work until it works. And when it works, everyone can do it. And I normally think about this one as a 2-stage chart in which the first stage is all about differentiation. You do a lot of research, you try to make things to get to a level of performance or confidence that make you sure that you can deploy that AI. And once you get that level, you stop caring about the frontier, and you care about what we always care in technology, which is reducing the marginal cost per user. Why I say that? If you think about AI, especially in the context of SaaS, especially in the context of existing businesses, right now that AI is increasing the marginal cost of serving a user, which was a reality that wasn't before. You were Figma before, you develop your tool, you spend a lot of time thinking about, hey, how am I going to be able to make this work? And once you get it work, you put it up there, and marginal cost is equal 0. Now I'm Figma, and I have to start adding AI features, and every time that I put an AI feature, I need to continue paying OpenAI, or I need to continue paying Anthropic, or whoever they're using as a model provider, and my marginal cost is not 0. Once that works, their focus is on lowering the cost of that service so they can go close to 0. So now, how do you make that sustainable and defensible? In my specific case, which is the one that I know better, consumer, there is only one way you can do it. It's like once you aggregate demand, you're able to control part of the whole supply thing, and that makes way more value for the user. So what you do is you need to move extremely fast. First mover advantage is a real thing. When you start unblocking new use cases for the user, users tend to stick to that one. I think it was OpenRouter, the one that called it the Cinderella slippery whatever framework, in which as soon as something works, users stick to that solution. Because agents are becoming more and more powerful and more use cases are becoming available, you have to be the first ones unblocking those ones. That's how we think about it in consumer. Obviously, extremely complicated race. We're doing it with some of the largest players in the world with a lot of AI research, but thanks to agents also in the internal side, that allows startups to compete and move faster than big organizations, which is something that we can try to defend over the long run. Again, I know it's not a super satisfying answer. The reality is that in the AI world where the cost of developing software and the cost of doing things is going down, competition is also going up, and that's good and bad, but it makes everything way more complicated.
And specifically about your product, is there a branding component, a habit loop formation? Like, what are the other tangents that you're exploring?
Yeah.
No?
I always use the same example. Like, unless you are very much into running, people don't know whether a sneaker for running is Nike or Adidas or whatever. They buy the sneaker that they like. When technology is a commodity underlying your product, people don't really know and understand and see the difference between using GPT 5.2 or using Cloud 4.6. It's exactly the same for them. So branding and the way you introduce the product is extremely differential. Something that we bet a lot into, is this idea of local AI. Like, ChatGPT solves the problems for 10% of the population or 20% of the population, depending on the country, that is the whole day behind a computer. For 80% of the population that are deskless, their problems are others. And the way we need to solve those problems, the way we need to present the technology is completely different. And that has been, for us, differential. For instance, in Latin America, our largest markets are there. It's like, hey, we do AI that talks the same way that people does, that solves the problems that people need. And even though ChatGPT could do that one, we are the default for them. So that has extreme value for us.
Makes total sense. Daniel, how do you think about defensibility and moats?
Between what, sorry?
Defensibility, moats.
You
guys
moats.
are...
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, so for startups, I think there are 2 things that you have an advantage. One is purpose. I mentioned this earlier, but if you've got a strong purpose, you have a shot at then being able to attract talent that resonate with that purpose. there's also something important that you mentioned about agents that are ultimately going to be buying your services. I mentioned this earlier, but in Greek, in Greece, they learn about sophistry and rhetoric, and they said there are three things that you need to convince somebody of something: ethos, logos, and pathos. So ethos is your credibility, essentially your brand. And as a startup, you probably don't have a brand unless you have a personal brand. The second is pathos. Does this emotionally make sense? And but the third is logos. Does this logically make sense? And I think this is really where startups have the advantage. Unfortunately, that's the thing that people focus on the least, logically making sure that these products align with what they need. But I think that's what you need to focus on. How can I convince the people that are going to be buying my service that this makes logical sense to them? And how are you going to convince an AI? So I mentioned earlier that AIs are going to be much more rational than human beings at making decisions. So those companies that are going to survive are the ones that can evidence the value of their products to their customer, like genuinely evidence it. I buy that coat because it has evidence of making me warm and dry, but also evidencing the values or purpose of your company to the world. I buy from Patagonia because it's sustainable and locally sourced. I think it's really important to emphasize and evidence those two things. So really focusing on purpose and evidencing it, I think, is critical. The second advantage is adaptability. We know that organizations, unfortunately, they move slow. The advantage that a startup has is your ability to adapt. And again, if you saw my talk, there's a strong correlation between your ability to adapt and your intelligence. That means rethinking how you structure yourselves, making sure you're an agentic-first organization, making sure you get the right people swarming around the problem, not necessarily creating fixed hierarchies, which I think are a hindrance to innovation. There's a concept called liquid organizations, which I'm a big fan of. But your ability to adapt is your advantage. And unless you have data. If you've got data that's proprietary, then you have an advantage. But most startups don't have that data. But what you could do is, if you can get agents to speak to each other, to reason, to create new knowledge that hasn't existed before, it's likely that that new knowledge could also be an advantage. So think about how you could leverage AI to create a defensible data set, at least for the short term, so you can you can stay ahead of the large organizations.
So speaking on that, having access to a proprietary data set, Eli, you were at Apple and you were working on knowledge graphs, if I'm not mistaken. How do you think about creating a moat, not versus Apple, but any other player, like with what you're building today? Like, how do you create defensibility?
So how do you create as a startup, or? So I'm going to be very, very practical. I think the only advantage that startups have nowadays is that we are able to work at the frontier of AI, and that's basically giving us speed. And then that just gets us to the start line. And there, I think it comes down to a few options. Either you've got network effects that allow you to grow faster and get more user data, or you have a unique data mode because you have access to this particular knowledge, etc. In Kala, what we're doing is we're trying to commoditize the data modes in a way. So we are providing data for any single startup that wants to be the next Harvey, the next VLEX, the next, financial advisor, the next investment committee. And so that means that they get faster to the game, but that also means they need to build their mode on something else. So they need to build their mode of users' data, usage, how fast they can interact their UIs, their products, and how fast they can be at leading that brand. So then they can get to the ethos, and all the things that you mentioned. But honestly, I think it's a very, very difficult time for startups nowadays. Before, you could get away by, I do a good fundraising, then I get access to the best engineers, and then with the best engineers, we're going to build the best tech, and that's going to give us a very solid competitive advantage. I think that's no longer the story nowadays, and it's all about what's your mode and what's your network effects.
And go for it.
Maybe also just one thing, that business model can also be an advantage. So obviously, if somebody's captured some of the market or is about to capture the market, the way that you might be able to compete against them is by open sourcing. If you make your thing free, and hopefully you've got enough capital to be able to survive long enough, but we're seeing definitely a trend to open sourcing technology to grab the market so you can then get the users, get the data, and then hopefully make it sustainable in the future.
Another thing that's quite unique that you two were talking about earlier is related to your point on speed and being a startup is you are giving superpowers to developers right now. Because I just heard the latest interview from the guy who built Cloud Code at Anthropic, who said that he hasn't written a line of code since November, but he is reviewing code and they're producing more code than ever. But you guys are also in a situation where we probably can move much faster by experimenting and adopting open source models, but also tools that put you at higher risk. But you also don't have to get like permission across 17 different layers of an organization to move fast and break stuff. No? So interesting. So moving on to reliability and trust, no? Because going back to our little framework here, if business logic moves to the agents, then agents making the decisions that used to have human accountability behind them is a different matter. No? So a 5% error rate in a chatbot is annoying, but a 5% error rate in an agent that's managing a supply chain is pretty catastrophic. No? Like, for instance, when I was building these nodes on Anthropic, my 5 chatbots were hallucinating, and Ellie said, hey, this is broken. So,
you should have your Scala.
Yeah, exactly. So do you want to take this one, Ellie? Like, how are you guys thinking about this?
Sure. I think like the big problem we have is that at the beginning, people are starting to implement agents, and you implement them in crunch, or like in executions that are going to happen, let's say, 1 every hour. And that is fine because there's still a person that can review that and you can just double check and verify. But at the moment we start working at scale and we're talking 1,000 iterations per minute, there is absolutely no personnel in the companies to be checking for that. And then the next step for you is like, okay, so I'm going to trust agents to go find information on the internet, put those in my CRM, in my databases, in my whatever internal tool I have got, and then my business is going to start running from this data. So unless I get to really good data, everything else is going to fall apart because that 5% is catastrophic. Imagine that you're deciding credit loans and you've got a 5% error rate. That is impossible. So we're building for that world where agents become absolutely the backbone of companies and they need to be really very trustable. So we are kind of like building this, let's say, new internet of trustable data. So all the agents can just connect to and get 100% accuracy without hallucinations.
It's interesting for regulated industries in particular. And Daniel, you were also mentioning before.
If I may say, like in fact, it's not only for regulated industries because we are seeing a huge number of startups that are starting to build on top of this data, and you don't want to be the next GPT wrapper. Like you need to be differentiated, you need to be the absolute expert in your market. And so I think the vision has shifted from like, oh, maybe only compliance or large corporations need it to absolutely everyone who's running a business that's mostly AI built, they're going to need it.
Makes total sense. How do you guys think about this from the enterprise perspective?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm super passionate about. I guess, as I mentioned earlier, what's going to happen or what's happening is that companies are unleashing an army of intoxicated graduates across their organization as agents, and it is going to be a shit show. Those agents are going to fail. And so agent governance is going to become a really important thing. And agent governance is everything from identifying your agentic needs to triaging them to, do you triage to their edge? Do you build it yourself? Do you buy it from a third party or work with a startup? To then building that agent, testing it, deploying, monitoring, eventually sunsetting. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of testing. And I'm not trying to do a plug here, but I started a company 2.5 years ago to solve machine consciousness. I won't bore you with that, but the first product that we're launching next week, it's taken 2 years to build, is agent verification. Now, if anybody's ever built software, you'll know that 80% of the effort required to deploy software is testing. And nobody wants to spend 80% of their time testing software, which is why it's going to be problematic over the next several years. Now, again, there are 2 types of tests. Again, forgive me to bore you with this, but there's one thing called non-functional verification, which is testing things like security and performance and hackability. The second set of tests are called functional verification. Does this thing actually have the ability to do its job? Now, the problem with LLMs is that if you ask it, if you say you're going to be a project manager, and if you ask it, can you manipulate a Gantt chart, it will say yes, but it can't manipulate a Gantt chart. So what's going to happen over the next several years is that there's going to be much more emphasis on these agents having to prove that they have the capability, not just the knowledge, but the skills, the ability to use workflows, tools, to be able to deal with ambiguous situations, good actors, bad actors. We've actually built a solution that simulates agents in real-world environments to test whether these things are actually capable to do their job. And it's going to get even more complicated for two reasons. One is, once these agents are in production, they can adapt themselves. So they're going to adapt in ways you can't predict. So it won't be 80% testing. It will be 99% continuous testing of agents in production. And also these agents can communicate with each other. They can operate in non-linear ways. You get very strange emergent behavior, like what we're seeing with Maltbook. And that makes it even more difficult to test. Testing is going to become a very important thing over the coming years.
Completely agree. We have 7 minutes left, and I want to leave at least 5 for questions from the audience. But last one, which is probably on everyone's minds, and you're all builders, and you're all seeing how people are using tools and making themselves more productive. I'm wondering, what would you say to people in terms of what they should place their attention in studying for themselves? Like the types of skill sets or abilities that are going to become less replaceable or more fundamental in a world where intelligence of certain types can be available or more available on tap, no? So, Alvaro, please.
So that's a good question. The way I think about this one is, if what happened to software engineering, which is, as you were mentioning before, and it's also in my company, 99% of the code is already AI written, and there is a lot of things that go beyond coding in software engineering, but it's something that is becoming solvable relatively quickly. If that extrapolates to the rest of the white-collar jobs or tasks, what do we need to focus on? And I think there are two things that we still can add a lot of value and that will remain true for a long time. First is having agency. Like, there has never been a better time to be builder. It is extremely complex because there has never been a better time and everyone can do it, but it's also the time in which a recent graduate from the university with a 200 euros cloud code subscription is able to do things that require a 10 people engineering team before. So that's a great opportunity. Now, to make that happen, what you need is that agency to want to do things. That is still there, and that's going to be very valuable. And the second one is taste. We'll see how long for, but the ability to build beautiful products, not only from an UX, UI perspective, but beautiful products that actually solve problems, both in consumer and enterprise, that is extremely valuable. And if you focus the hiring and if you focus the training on getting the people that are able to solve problems and are actually do it in a beautiful way, that is very, very valuable. And let's try to get AI to do the rest of the things.
Agency, taste.
I wrote an article recently on LinkedIn I listed 16 things that as a founder you need to think about that you won't learn from ChatGPT. And if there's one thing that you need to learn about, it's yourself. Learn about your dysfunctions, your traumas as a child, learn about your attachment issues, learn about your lack of understanding of AI. Ultimately, you need to understand your deficiencies and solve them either by improving yourself or hiring people that can help fill that gap. Ultimately, it's going to be down to you, so you need to be the best version of yourself to give your startup the biggest chance of success.
Introspection.
To me, I think it's all about curiosity nowadays. Like, what is going to change in the next 2 years? Like, the world is going to change drastically. So your capability to be at the edge of it, to be curious, to understand, to test, to tinker, is going to really change your path in this race.
Awesome. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I don't know if there's a mic anywhere, and I can't see anything with the lights. Any questions from the audience?
There is.
There's one over here.
Please.
Mike.
There's a mic coming to you. 1 second. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm a partner at Collateral Impact with Impact Advisory for Impact Startups. So my question perhaps is not directly with my business, related to my business, but in general, do you see a shift of employments that could shift into the verification role? So for example, for Kala, what you're building, when you're training more data, more agents with deep knowledge, do you see perhaps new employment opportunity could be created there? Because we know that employment for future generations has been a big problem that AI has, been set to create. So I wanted to ask you that. And then perhaps that would go for Daniel as well, when you say that you have to test 99% of the agent's capabilities. Do you see that could potentially be what human could turn to do? And if you think agents would do that too, perhaps.
Okay, so I can take the first one. So I think with regards to the future of employment, I really hope we are aimed to a better future than having humans just review data sets for machines to operate with. I think the capabilities of agents at structuring, building, fact-checking large amounts of information is going to be huge and maybe outperform human judgment in the future. I think what we're really lacking, though, is who are the ones that are really going to understand the customers, who are the ones that are really going to understand the problems, and then orchestrate agents to solve those types of problems. I don't see it, hopefully, we don't end up just being the reviewers of data sets for machines to run on.
And one thing there, and the way I think about this one is, we should use AI for things that we don't want. And as Daniel was saying, no one likes to spend 80% of their time doing reviews of stuff. So we should devote a lot of time and think a lot about how you can actually let the AI do that part. Because at the end of the day, AI should be here to help us. And if we don't do reviews, we should do other stuff.
Yeah. So getting AIs to test AIs is problematic. So you do need human beings to come up with corner cases, domain-specific tests that AIs can't come up with, so that's important. Do I think it's going to be the job that everybody's going to be doing in the future? No. I think beyond 4 years, nobody knows what they're talking about. We have no idea what will happen in terms of our impact on jobs. What I do know is that humans are incredibly adaptable. And again, I go back to this idea that adaptation is synonymous with intelligence. We are the most intelligent species on the planet. Curious and resilient and critical think. Maybe AI can be an accelerator to allow us to accelerate our ability to adapt to a changing world.
Last one shot, a quick question. There at the back.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay.
And see you.
Okay. My name is Christian, and I'm creating a SaaS from scratch. And I have a beta model. It is called Penguin Brighter. So I just wanted to know, what can I do to market my new SaaS? So this is a SaaS for marketing agencies and coaches. So I just wanted to know, what can I do to launch the SaaS? And what is the pricing model for me to have?
Talk to me afterwards if you want.
Thank you.
So that's distribution as a moat, which is also becoming a problem. Well, thank you very much, guys. We're out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. For our panel.